My name is Kelsey Whitmore, and if you ask my father, I'm just the shadow that trails behind his favorite daughter. Growing up, whenever we met someone new, he'd smile proudly and say, "This is Charlotte, our future lawyer." And then with a shrug, "And her sister." No name, no mention of my scholarship, my research, my startup. Just her sister, like I was a footnote in a story he didn't want to tell. I used to wonder if I was being too sensitive. Until Charlotte's high school graduation, when I stood 3 feet from him and he raised his glass, saying, "To my one and only star." I wasn't on the banner. I wasn't in the family photo. They didn't even crop me out. They retook it without me. No one ever said I was disowned. But I learned that you don't need a fight to be forgotten. You just need to be quiet long enough for them to build a version of the family where you were never there. So I got quiet. For years. Until one Tuesday, when an email from the alumni office popped up. Eastern University, class of 2025, commencement highlights. I nearly deleted it, but one line caught my eye. Keynote speaker, CEO of one of North America's fastest-growing medtech startups. No name, just a silhouette. But I knew it was me, and I knew they didn't, not yet. When I say my family forgot me, I don't mean it happened all at once. It's not like someone slammed a door or screamed me out of the room. It happened in whispers, in the pauses between introductions, in the empty space where my name used to belong. It started with Charlotte's achievements. She was always brilliant, valedictorian, debate champion, scholarship darling. I admired her, I really did. But admiration has a funny way of turning sour when it's served with silence. Every time she won something, my parents' eyes lit up, and mine dimmed by contrast. It wasn't that I failed. I just wasn't interesting enough to mention. When I got accepted to college, there was no family dinner, no card, no Facebook post, just a nod from my dad that felt more like a formality than pride. "That's good, Kel," he said, flipping through a newspaper. Still, I tried. I came home for holidays, brought little gifts, asked about their lives. They answered, but never asked about mine. And eventually, I stopped showing up. One Christmas, I received a card from them. Well, technically. It was a glossy photo of the whole family in matching red outfits, even the dog, posed in front of the fireplace. In the exact spot where I'd stood the year before, Charlotte now stood, holding the dog, flanked by my parents. They didn't just crop me out. They replaced me. The caption read, "Love from all of us." That was the year I stopped wondering what I did wrong. Instead, I asked myself a different question. What happens when no one notices you're gone? It's a quiet kind of grief, not loud, not cinematic, just a slow erosion of worth. You start to disappear in your own reflection. Your voice softens, your opinions shrink. You make yourself smaller to take up less space, because no one seems to want you in the room anyway. I buried myself in work, not the kind they could brag about at brunch, but the kind that built something real. I joined a small research project in rural healthcare infrastructure. It was underfunded, barely staffed, and no one expected it to go anywhere. But I saw something in it: potential, impact, purpose. And I wanted to pour everything I had into it. So I did. I stayed up nights filing grant applications under a pseudonym, soldering prototype equipment in my dorm hallway, chasing contracts no one thought I'd land. I didn't put my real name on the early papers. I didn't want to be found, not yet. I wasn't hiding out of shame. I was building in peace. My mother once told me, "You don't have to be loud to be powerful." She died before any of this happened, before I became something worth talking about. But her voice lingered in my head when I was alone, pushing me to keep going, even when no one clapped. By the time I turned 27, the startup had become something more than a side project. We had traction, we had users, we had funding, and still, no one in my family knew, or cared. And I preferred it that way, until I saw that email. The keynote investor, the one being whispered about on campus, the one no one had ever seen in person, that was me. And suddenly, for the first time in a long time, I didn't want to disappear. I wanted to show up, not to beg for a seat at their table, but to prove I'd built my own. I didn't build the company out of ambition. Not at first. I built it out of necessity, out of silence, out of the aching, stretching need to matter somewhere, anywhere, even if it was under a name no one recognized. The startup began as a research initiative in a forgotten corner of the university, focused on rural medical access. I wasn't even listed as a lead. I was the quiet kid in the back who knew how to stretch a $200 grant into 6 weeks of working prototypes. Most days, I skipped meals to buy parts. I'd fall asleep in the engineering building between classes. No one noticed, no one asked, and it was better that way. The fewer eyes on me, the more I could create. I gave the project a name, Metfear, drawn from an old word meaning to carry across. That's all I wanted, to carry care across the gaps the system ignored. Small towns, neglected clinics, outdated tools. Everyone wanted to solve urban healthcare, but no one looked out past the suburbs. I did, because that's where I felt most like myself, on the edge of the map. We got our first traction through a local pilot, then a second. I filed every legal document through an alias, not just for privacy, but because I didn't want any connection to the Whitmore name. I didn't want the startup to be something my father could claim credit for once it succeeded. I didn't want Charlotte's friends whispering about how we were sisters, as if that gave her a slice of my work. I wanted it clean, independent, invisible. And for a while it was. We grew through word of mouth and angel investors. I kept my head down. My CTO, Owen, knew my real name, but he never used it outside private emails. Our team respected the boundary without question. They knew there was history I didn't talk about. They didn't push. They just followed the vision, and that was enough. We hired slowly, intentionally. No buzz, no headlines, no press kits. Our software reached over 24 rural networks before anyone outside the industry even realized we existed. And even then, the face of the company remained blank, on purpose. Then came the Summit Invitation, a major investor event hosted by Eastern University, my former campus, and Charlotte's soon-to-be alma mater. It was a full-circle moment I didn't ask for. At first, I ignored the invite. I figured it was spam, but the subject line said, Commencement Weekend Keynote Invitation, Unconfirmed CEO. I opened it on a whim, already planning to delete it, but when I read the itinerary, my stomach dropped. The keynote slot, slated to begin just 40 minutes after Charlotte's graduation ceremony, was reserved. For me, not by name, not publicly, but someone had tracked the IPs, the filings, the grants. Someone had done the math. They knew, even if they weren't sure. They suspected. And now, so did I. A second email came hours later, this one from my aunt, sent to the whole family chain by accident. Graduation updates, catering menu, seating chart. At the bottom, one note from my father. Make sure Kelsey doesn't hear about it. Last thing we need is a distraction on Charlotte's big day. Distraction. That word didn't sting. It sliced. It wasn't carelessness, it was coordination. My absence wasn't just accepted, it was planned. I stared at the screen, unmoving. Not angry, not sad, just cold. That's when I made the decision. I wasn't going to ruin their event. I wasn't going to shout or cry or beg to be seen. I was going to be exactly what they feared most, present. I didn't pack much. Just a black blazer, one understated dress, and the low heels I hadn't worn since pitching our first major funding round. I wasn't going for glamour. I was going for precision. On the train ride back to campus, I passed familiar places. The coffee shop where I used to write code between shifts. The science building where I once slept on a bench during finals week. That version of me, tired, invisible, felt like someone I used to know. Someone I'd buried without ever holding a funeral. I arrived the night before graduation. Checked into a small hotel. No room service, no fanfare. I reviewed the summit deck alone in my room, lit only by the soft glow of my laptop. Data slides, case studies, market projections, all clean, sharp, and untraceable to anyone who ever doubted me. And then I opened the graduation ticket portal. Under guest name, I didn't type Kelsey Whitmore. I used a variation, just initials. Enough to blend in. Enough to get close without setting off alarms. I picked a front row seat, right in the middle of the parents section. Let's call it poetic proximity. The next morning, the sun was already high when I arrived at the venue. My heart didn't pound. My hands didn't shake. I wasn't nervous. I was ready. The usher scanned my ticket and smiled. "Reserved early, front row. Looks like someone really wanted you here." I smiled back. "I guess they did." I sat, third seat from the aisle. The seats around me slowly filled, parents, siblings, grandparents with handheld camcorders. I scanned the crowd, then the stage. And then I saw her. Charlotte. Her cap was perfectly centered, gown crisp and camera ready. She sat with her back straight, chin tilted just slightly. A practiced pose. I knew it well. She wore it every time she needed to perform. 2 rows behind me, I heard a familiar voice. Low, firm, controlled. My father. He was speaking to someone. Security, maybe. Clipboard, radio. He wasn't yelling, but his tone had a sharpness I knew too well. The kind that could cut through silence without ever raising volume. I kept my eyes forward. I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. Let him scan the crowd. Let him wonder. Let him squint and question the shape of the woman in the front row. The usher returned. "Ma'am, just confirming for the seating log. Name?" I handed her my ticket. She nodded, scribbled, moved on. No suspicion, just another proud guest. A professor passed by, then stopped mid-step. He looked at me once, then again. You're Kelsey Whitmore, aren't you?" I didn't answer. I just smiled. He leaned in, lowering his voice. "Your case study on rural health infrastructure, brilliant work. I use it in my seminar." 2 parents turned to look. My father's voice rose again behind me. "She's not supposed to be here. She's not on the list." But no one moved to remove me. I wasn't a threat. I was a mystery, and mysteries don't get kicked out. They get investigated. The loudspeakers clicked on. The ceremony was starting. Charlotte's name would be read soon. But this time, she wouldn't be the only Whitmore anyone remembered. I left my seat just as Charlotte's department head took the podium. I didn't wait to hear her name. I didn't need to. I wasn't there to witness her moment. I had my own. Across the quad, the investor summit was already underway. The air inside the glass auditorium was cooler, quieter, more focused. My assistant met me at the side entrance with the final slide deck in hand. "All set," she whispered. "They still don't know it's you. Even the dean thinks Metfear's CEO is some reclusive Harvard grad." I gave a slight nod and flipped through the presentation. Metrics, projections, case studies. It was solid, but something about the final slide felt too polite. It just said, "Thank you, safe, forgettable." I deleted it, typed a new title, Kelsey Whitmore, Eastern University, Class of Never. Underneath, "You erased me, so I built something permanent." My assistant leaned over my shoulder and blinked. "That's bold." "It's honest." She didn't argue. Backstage, the moderator's voice echoed through the speakers. "Please welcome the founder and CEO of Metfear." I stepped into the lights. They didn't feel hot. The stage didn't feel high. I didn't feel small. The audience turned. Trustees, professors, industry leaders, students. I didn't bring notes. I didn't need them. "I built Metfear," I began, "because no one in my family thought I could finish anything. And they weren't entirely wrong. I didn't finish college. I didn't finish Thanksgiving dinners. I didn't finish being the daughter they wanted." Pause. "But I finished this." Click. Slide change. A map of rural health expansions. Then photos, partnerships, renovated clinics, the faces of people we'd helped. Click. One grainy image. Me, 6 years ago, hunched in a hallway with wires and a soldering iron. The room was quiet, focused, listening. And then, movement. Second row, stage left. A professor leaned towards someone wearing a cap and gown. "You didn't tell me she was your sister," he said, not realizing his mic picked it up. Charlotte stiffened. The professor looked back at me, then nodded. "Nice work, CEO." And that was the moment. Not the applause that followed. Not the headlines that came hours later. Not even the messages I'd soon receive from people who'd once forgotten I existed. It was that one line, from the one person Charlotte desperately wanted to impress. Spoken aloud, in public, into a microphone she couldn't control. I didn't linger on stage. No photo ops, no press interviews. I exited through the back hallway, while the applause still echoed behind me, bouncing off the glass walls like a memory refusing to fade. By the time I reached the hotel lobby, my phone had already begun buzzing. 37 unread messages, 6 missed calls, all unknown numbers. And then one text from my cousin. "Was that you on stage? Dad nearly choked." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The clip had already gone viral. The professor's voice, "Nice work, CEO," was being looped, subtweeted, reposted. I saw screenshots of Charlotte's frozen expressions circulating on student forums. The shot of me standing in front of the screen, with my name in bold white font, was already becoming its own moment. And through all of it, I stayed quiet. I didn't tag the university. I didn't post a caption. I didn't even follow up with the organizers. But I knew they saw it. Because 2 hours later, Charlotte's graduation photo disappeared from my father's Facebook page, replaced by a quote about humility. Classic. Charlotte didn't post anything either. No "so proud of my journey" or "thank you to my amazing family." Just one carefully filtered shot of her gown. No smile, no tags, no context. The silence was louder than any apology could have been. That weekend, my inbox turned into a strange museum of ghosts. A message from my father's college friend. "Greg mentioned you started something in healthcare. Our son just graduated. Would love to connect." An email from Charlotte's boyfriend, who'd once barely said hello to me at family functions. "Didn't realize Met Fear was yours. Truly impressive. Let me know if you're ever building a legal team." And the boldest of all, a distant cousin who hadn't spoken to me in a decade. "Hey Kels, long time. Saw the keynote. Wow. Any chance you're hiring interns this summer?" None of them mentioned Charlotte. None of them mentioned the years they'd spent pretending I didn't exist. They just wanted in. I didn't respond to most of them, but I forwarded one message to my assistant with a note. "Add this to the not in this lifetime list." She replied with a thumbs up and a skull emoji. I stared at the screen for a long time. They'd once called me a dropout, said I was lucky to have any job at all, warned me not to embarrass the family name. And now they wanted desk jobs, referrals, recommendations. But the version of me they ignored, she didn't exist anymore. I never had to raise my voice. I just raised the bar. They tried to bury me in silence, but I came back with something louder. And this time they couldn't look away. I never went back to the house. Not when my father sent word through a cousin. Not when Charlotte posted a vague quote about rebuilding bridges. Not even when an aunt called just to check in after 5 years of silence. I knew what they were doing. It wasn't remorse. It was reputation management. They didn't want me back. They just didn't want to look like the people who'd pushed me out. There was nothing for me there anyway. Not in the room with the peeling wallpaper where my childhood trophies used to gather dust. Not in the garden my mother once loved, now overgrown and sour from neglect. Not in the family dinners where my chair had long been quietly removed. But I did return, in ways they never expected. I returned in the keynote clips embedded in university ethics courses. I returned in healthcare pilot programs using our software. I returned in late-night student discussions quoting my work, not knowing the name once belonged to a girl their professor had called a distraction. I had become someone they couldn't hold, couldn't reshape, couldn't take credit for. And that was the final gift. They tried to erase me with silence, but silence isn't absence. It's space. And I filled it. With code, with care, with something so deeply mine they could no longer claim it, question it, or contain it. A professor from Eastern University mailed me a handwritten note months later. It was short. "We've added your keynote to our curriculum. Under legacy and resilience." Legacy? It used to sound like a word meant for someone else. A name etched into a family tree I'd been pruned from. Now it belonged to me. They once called me a mistake, a ghost, a problem best forgotten. But I didn't fight for space at their table. I built a building next door. And this time, no one could ignore the name on the doorplate. Kelsey Whitmore, CEO. Unforgettable.